Hello, I'm Christine Zips, founder of Wired Schools and Zips Media, as well as Safer Alternatives to Government Schools. Today is our second meeting of our SAGS tribe, and I'm very pleased that today we're going to be having two presenters. And our first presentation will be from Heather and Leah from Education Foundations, and they'll be starting us off today. And I invite you both to elaborate a bit on your introduction, a little bit of your background if you like, and we'll be sharing in the show notes below links to their websites for more information. So thank you very much for your attendance, and we will get this going right now. Thank you. Go ahead, Leah and Heather.
Thanks so much for having us. All right. And now, but our pictures in Leah, I'll let you go first to introduce yourself.
My name is Leah Torres, and I have 5 children total, and the oldest is 13 and the youngest is 2. And before COVID, the older 4 had all been attending a private school. And when the shutdown happened, we switched to homeschool, and we never went back to the school system, public or private. And really, part of our realization was that they weren't meeting the needs of my children. I have my daughter, one of them has a language disability, one of them has a speech disability. Some of them would get done with work really fast and then would be bored. Some of them did the minimal amount of work to get a grade and would have holes in their math because they just didn't learn it and nobody enforced them to learn it. It was more of a participation grade. And we really realized that that was not going to work for us. Being an education background, I didn't realize the position I was putting my children as they got older, that they were going to struggle more and more in math, even though my background is math, because I thought people were holding them accountable, my kids accountable, and they weren't. And so really we went to a homeschool environment and get help because I still work. So we have friends from our church who help us as well with the homeschool. So sometimes, depending on the day, sometimes I do it, and then sometimes they go to one of our friends' house to especially get math help, especially with my 13-year-old, because he really needs one-on-one attention. And somebody has to sit with him and do the math problems with them. And so that's when our help comes in. And I'm really thankful that we have a really strong homeschool community where I live. Most of our friends homeschool. And it's just been really great.
Right. Thank you. And you're going to see as we dive into this discussion a little bit more, Leah has actually started a co-op within her community. And so we're going to be talking about that one in the second part of the presentation. And so, hi, my name is Heather Peltier. I have my doctorate in curriculum and instruction. I have been working in K-12 education since 2001. I've been a classroom teacher, English language arts, social studies. I've taught a range of grade levels from elementary all the way up through college level. I moved into a literacy coaching position and really started working with students more on their reading skills, started to get more interested in how assessment could be used to better understand where students were and meet their needs, and then kind of moved into that assessment area. And so I began working in district and then state Department of Education level positions. And now I work for myself. Actually, this is a brand new venture for me and for Leah. We have just begun this company, Education Foundations, and we are very excited. My personal background with homeschooling is I actually am a product of a homeschooling family. My father was in construction whenever I was young, and he had to move a lot. And so my parents had the choice of either we send him on the road and we'd be separated from him for months, weeks at a time, or we could follow with him. And, we lived in a camper as we traveled from place to place. But doing that would mean if we attended public schools or private schools, even we would have to transfer schools all the time. So my mother homeschooled myself and my two younger brothers. And we loved it. Actually, we really all thrived in that. We had very different learning styles and different needs, and the instruction was able to just be individualized for us, which was fantastic. I'm actually a late mother. I was actually told in my early 30s that I would likely never be able to have children. And so I have now a miracle little boy. I got pregnant when I was 40. And so he is not at school age yet. But we are planning to homeschool once he gets that age. Right now he does, we do some lessons, but at that little age, it's more things like understanding some general science concept. We work on holding the pencil and writing. And so he's definitely at that preschool age, general literacy instruction. So we haven't actually moved into those higher levels of homeschooling, but we're really excited about this journey. So that's about us. So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about some considerations. So if you are looking at starting a homeschool co-op, the first thing to begin with is your initial thought is, what's our why? So why are you looking at founding this co-op? And you're going to see throughout this that we ask you to really dig into a lot of questions. So we give an overview of a lot of the things that you need to really think about and dig into, because there are so many different directions you can take this, but it's important to be thorough in your planning. If you have a strong foundation of planning, then that's going to lay that foundation for the success later on as you actually get your co-op up and running and move through. You're going to see everyone will experience some growing pains more than likely, but a really solid foundation is going to mitigate a lot of that. So the first thing to think about is, what's your why? So why do you want to start a co-op to begin with? Is it for purposes of socialization? You want to make sure your child gets that social interaction and involvement. Is it because your child has reached the age where maybe they're getting into more specialized or more rigorous coursework and you're not comfortable doing that type of instruction yourself? You want to lean on others, reach out for some support, and it's helpful to have that framework and structure in place. The same with, is it instruction in subjects in which parents may be less proficient? Those kind of can go hand in hand depending. Is it advocacy? Because there are many, many states where the homeschool guidelines are so general that they're left to the discretion of the districts in terms of what they provide homeschooling parents. So in many cases, there are resources that your child would have access to if you were at a public school and you're still paying all of your property taxes, but the state legislation has left it in the hands of the districts to decide whether to offer these or not. Things like participation in elective classes or enrichment opportunities or athletics, potentially funding for instructional materials. So is the purpose to gather some parents together and advocate collectively as a group? Many voices speak louder than one. Is the purpose to meet those legal or bureaucratic requirements? Depending on your state, some states have very few. Some states have a really intense structure of legal requirements for homeschooling parents. So they might require things like transcripts, grade books, tracking attendance, developing portfolios to show growth, all of that. So really the important piece is to think about, what's your why, because that's going to determine your answer to many of these questions that we're going to talk about as we dig into this a little bit more. And it may be more than one why. You might have more than one of these goals, and that's perfectly fine. It's just to really sit at the beginning and think through, why are we doing this? The other thing, degree of formality is another one. Are you trying to formally organize and develop a formal co-op, potentially with dues or other components like that? Or is it just a more informal group, maybe for social purposes, et cetera? And so you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, we actually have structured this for two types of more formal co-op and an informal. And we give some suggestions and options for each of those. And then the last thing to really be aware of when you're beginning this process is your state regulations. So there are some states like Washington, D.C., which I know is not a state, but but some states really do not allow anyone other than a parent or guardian to homeschool a child. So that's really important, just to be aware of the regulations in your state. Is there anything in your state regulation that might be important to consider when you're beginning this process of starting a co-op? And the Home Educators Association at your state should be able to assist you with some of those if you have questions about the legal guidelines. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association is another really great organization that has some really good resources for understanding what those guidelines are in your state. Right.
So as you're trying to start your co-op, you're really going to need to be clear on your goals. It doesn't help if one family wants to have a co-op because of socialization and the other family wants rigorous coursework. So really your academic goals, is it electives and you have high schoolers and they need elective credits and socialization? Is it rigorous coursework that you need for upper level students? What is the purpose of this is very, very important, because over the years, I also do homeschool evaluations for people in my state, and I'll hear about, we were in this co-op and then they had too many coursework requirements and it was too much like school, and so we left. If you're going to have a co-op that's structured so similar to a school, then the lines begin to blur between, why don't you just sounding a lot more like school and an institution and not homeschooling. So that is key. The academic goals, the commitment to the co-op's goals, and the operationalization, behavior expectations is really important. You have to be able to find people who really discipline or correct their children in a similar manner, and you're all on the same page about expectations. Sometimes I've noticed that my kids, they'll interrupt each other because they're siblings, and then when we're in our co-op environment, my kids are running the show because they're always wanting to talk to me and they're interrupting the other children. And so we really had to put a handle on that and learn, that's being rude. We need to work on our manners. That was actually one of the reasons why we started our co-op. But, if I ask somebody to sit down and be quiet, are their parents going to say, oh, you shouldn't tell my child to do that? So you really need the change. And then, as you're doing this, is it expected that you're going to go to all of them? Or is it expected that you can miss some weeks? Some co-ops actually have attendance guidelines. And so that is part of it. So make sure you're all on the same page about what the expectation is. If you're going to show even a cartoon, do some parents not want their children to watch any television or have any screen time? These are all things to discuss before you start a co-op.
Okay. All right. And I'll mention also Leah's video is off. She just beat me. Her internet is down right now. These are the challenges of the virtual meeting. And so she's working off a hotspot. So her streaming is not ideal. So she's cut the picture just to preserve some of that bandwidth. So just in case you were you were wondering where Leah has gone to. So that's what is happening. And yes, when we talk about, and we'll dig in a little bit more in terms of the parents' commitment to the co-op's goals and operationalization. And a lot of that is things like, some co-ops will require parents to commit to teaching a course, which is that commitment of time or planning of resources. Some parents require some co-ops require dues from parents. And so, and we'll dig into that a little bit more once we get into the nuts and bolts of this. So So now we are jumping into the nuts and bolts of this. So we're going to talk a little bit about considerations for formal co-ops first. And then the second part will be focused on more of the informal co-ops. So for the formal co-ops, oh gosh, okay, that's easier. So I'm trying to drag my picture thing so that I can see what's on my screen. So first of all, the first question is, are you beginning an independent formal co-op, or are you jumping into part of an existing network like Classical Conversations? This presentation is really going to focus primarily on independent co-ops, because if you're joining an existing network, then they typically have a strong structure in place where they'll get lots of guidelines and guidance. And if you're a director of Classical Conversations co-op, for example, they're going to walk you through all of that. And so, this would be a little bit beside the point, and some of these may not apply. So our focus is primarily on those starting an independent co-op here. You'll consider whether you want to make a formal legal status that is likely necessary for a formal co-op. Advantages, there are many advantages to becoming a nonprofit organization, but there are also costs entailed in that. And so consider that. We're going to walk through some of the costs involved in this, and those would need to be passed along to your co-op members. And so these are all part of your thought process as you're walking through what's it going to cost to really get this co-op up and running in a really smooth fashion. And so getting some, potentially some legal assistance to get yourself established as an official nonprofit will be beneficial to your members, but will entail some cost. The other thing to think about, and we'll dig a little bit more into what this looks like a little bit later, board of directors, is that you would then need to have a board of directors. And so thinking about who that might be and how you're going to solicit those board members, and what that structure looks like for them in terms of the degree of commitment, time commitment, other types of commitments. The costs that are you going to pass along to members is that some co-ops are organized where parents can opt their children into certain classes. The one in my area, for example, is a lot actually like a community college structure, where on any given day of the week, and it runs 5 days a week, there are multiple classes running simultaneously. So you could opt into the 9 a.m. kindergarten class on Tuesdays, and then you would pay a tuition amount for that class, which covers the materials for the course, the instructor fees for the course, and also some of those built-in co-op costs. So it can be things like structure like that on a per class basis. It could be a set amount, monthly or quarterly. It could be annual amounts. Let me see if I can move this out of the way. Okay. And then the other thing to consider is cost and lab supplies. So, course and lab supplies. So are there materials that need to be purchased for the course? Are there hands-on materials for labs, et cetera? Those would need to be factored into whenever you're doing that, unless you are self-funding the course. So, okay. So meeting location and associated costs. So it might be that you meet at a member's house. You might have options like a public library. I know my public library has a room that community members can sign up for and reserve. Depending on how frequently you want to do that, there may be a cost associated with that. One of the biggest co-ops in my area has actually an entire building that they've gotten. They're extremely well organized. They've got a lot of offerings in place. And so if you're going to do something like that, like get an entire facility, there are going to be obviously costs associated with that. You can rent locations, you can rent rooms within, sometimes churches have got some extra classrooms that they use on the weekends and that sit vacant during the week that they're willing to work with you for meeting locations for. So there are lots of different options, but that is one of the big considerations, is where are you going to meet? Where is this going to happen? And does your meeting location support the goals of the co-op, the work that you want to do? If your purpose is to have classes, do you have, enough small and quiet classrooms so that students can really focus on what's happening in the class, at class instruction? If it's a more social co-op, then you might not want to have one set meeting location. It might be that we're setting up meetings at this playground and at this parent's house, and maybe over here at a children's museum, or we're doing a library date today. So that will really vary. Any required supplies or infrastructure. So if you are going for a really a formal co-op that's going to be offering some courses, then you might have costs for things like potentially desks, or making sure that you've got Wi-Fi services or other things in place that the children are going to need when they're there participating at the co-op. And then course instructors. I think, Leah, are you?
Right.
Okay, you're here still. Yeah.
When you're planning your co-op and who's going to instruct it, I've seen some co-ops where the parents all will teach a class, and they'll do those with ones that either they are familiar with, maybe they used to be teachers and that's what they taught, or what they prefer or what they were good at. And sometimes I've seen them ask for outsources. And so I have a friend who teaches Spanish because she is from Colombia and Spanish is her first language. And one of the co-ops asked her to teach, and they ended up paying her for that teaching experience, very similar to how you would pay a teacher. And so it's sometimes when the parents volunteer to teach, if it's a very highly structured co-op, then the cost is reduced for them. And then the parents who don't teach, they would pay full price for all the supplies. So I've seen it work multiple different ways. Another idea is not only to have former teachers be part of your co-op, but those who maybe you have college students who are in teaching programs who would like to become teachers. It's a really great experience for them to get some training if you're running your co-op. And really, again, maybe they are really good in upper level math. And so a college student maybe will remember how to do algebra 2 or pre-calc better than some adults. I know that I took those courses, but it was close to 25 years ago. And so if I was going to teach it, I would need to brush up on it. Same with probably some chemistry courses I would have to brush up on. But if one of my college students who we know are in that course or just took that course, paying them to teach that class could also work out well. But something to keep in mind, depending on your state, is, are there requirements for the teachers? Do they need background checks? Is there some sort of mandatory training for abuse and reporting? Are you going to require credentials, or could it just be anybody who likes a subject or wants to teach that? So those are different things to think about. Also, the commitment of the teachers. The person, if you're a parent, are they going to come every week to teach? Is that part of the commitment level? Or do they just want to teach a few times and then say, this isn't for us, now you're out of a teacher? So you really have to think it through and see what the best is for you and your children moving forward in the co-op, and for everybody's children as well.
Okay, and Christine, I just want to do a quick time check because I know I think we got started not right at noon, and but I know that we have 30 minutes, so I want to be respectful of the other presenters as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that's fine. Thanks so much. Actually,
Oh, sure.
according to my clock, it looks like you got going. It wasn't until about 15 after the hour. So,
Okay, so we still have some time.
Sure, you do. You're good.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
You're doing great. What you're sharing is so great. I love it.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. I looked at my clock and I was like, oh, well, we're past 12:30. So let me
you're
just.
good.
Okay.
You're good.
Thank
Keep
you.
going.
Okay, we'll go. We've got a lot. All right. So another thing to think about, I said we dig in a little bit more with that board of directors. So if your co-op if you've got a formal co-op and you're establishing it as a nonprofit, it is important to have that board of directors. So you'll need to kind of think that through at the beginning, make some plans. How many do you want to serve on the board? For how long will they be serving? Are you going to have it entirely co-op parents, or will you have some outside directors or community members in there? There are advantages and disadvantages to each one of those strategies. The other thing to think about is the degree of control that you, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped software. Software, is your co-op going to provide formal grades? If so, will you need a grade book? Software, is it going to be one type of software that you require all of the instructors to use, or are you going to have more informal grade accounting methods? And then accounting software, because if you're collecting dues from parents or course enrollment fees, or however you're collecting those funds, you'll need to make a legal accounting of that collection of funds in order for your annual reports as a nonprofit. You'll also have to think about what type of curriculum control do you want the co-op to have in place. So is it going to be much more open, where someone says, hey, I'm a parent, I'm in the co-op, and I've got this great idea for a course, and let's just go for it. Let's offer it, and anyone can sign up if they want. If you're doing an academic co-op, that is, obviously. Or is it something where you want more control for the board? So the instructor would have to submit a course outline, for example, or a curriculum, and say, hey, I want to use this textbook. And then the board members would need to go in and look at that and approve that. So that's one of the things to think about if you're going to be doing some academic offerings. Do all the classes have to follow a set program or textbook series? So might you say, hey, as a co-op, we've decided this is a curriculum that we're on board with, and we're going to, all of our courses should fall within this particular set, or could that vary by content area, by course? And what type of services might you offer for students with special needs? So if you have parents of students with special needs, and for example, maybe they really struggle with reading, would they be allowed to use audiobooks to supplement that? Leah actually shared with me the other day a story about one of her co-op members. The son has cystic fibrosis and has had a lot of medical issues, and is not able to read a lot, but he can comprehend and he can memorize. And so he is part of a classical conversations group and participates in their curriculum via those read alouds or audiobooks. But that's a type of accommodation that they have decided to allow. And so that's something just to think about. If you have special needs students, how might they be accommodated? To what extent is your co-op able to accommodate those students if you're doing academic offerings or other offerings? Let's see. Oh, and then the other thing to think about here is in terms of the parents' commitment level here as they're actually engaging with the co-op. Are they going to be able to drop students off the co-op, which, as I said, it's a really super organized, very formal, almost more like a community college type but for young children. Where I am, they do have the option where parents can drop students off if they've enrolled the child into a full day of courses. And so then you need to think about, are there any legal implications, or is there any insurance or anything else required for the co-op if you have that type of arrangement? All right, so here's digging a little bit more to that parental commitment. As we mentioned, some co-ops require parents to agree to serve as instructors. Some of them give the option to serve as instructors, and potentially they get a discount on some, their enrollment fees or their membership fees. Will parents need to be present during classes, or do you have more of a drop-off pickup arrangement? Are there set volunteer requirements? Are there things that you want parents to do? Let's say it's a social co-op. Did they have to take turns being responsible for organizing some of the outings, or whatever that may be involved in your particular co-op and its goals? Think about things like technology or text purchases. Are parents responsible for sending students with, a Chromebook or an iPad or something like that? Do they need to purchase the right text so that they can fully engage if they're doing classes through the co-op? And then to what extent do they have to support instructors through, just making sure their children are completing any homework if it is a co-op that offers academic courses? Another thing to think about is, what is your inclusion criteria for your co-op? So do you want this to be a wide open co-op where anyone can come in? Or do you want it to be a little bit more exclusive where you're screening parents? The co-op where I am is one where parents actually have to go through an application and an interview process. You have to come in and talk through, and that the advantage of that, as Leah mentioned, is to just make sure that you have parents that have some similar expectations in terms of, you know, the amount of commitment and what, you know, how their children are going to behave while they're participating in the co-op. One of the disadvantages is it's obviously pretty heavy in terms of the time commitment of whoever is actually doing that screening. Someone has to go through that application process with the parents then. And then what are their procedures, or what will your procedures be for handling any challenges? So suppose you have a parent that is not fulfilling their obligations, or they've agreed to teach a course and they're only showing up half the time, something like that. You know, how will your co-op address that? So it's not necessary to have a full written plan up, but at least to have some of these ideas in your mind in advance, like how are we going to deal with these things that may arise, so that when they come, you're not blindsided and you really can handle it and just keep on moving. Right, I'm gonna let Leah, if you still have connection, Leah, jump in here.
I do. So when we're talking about testing and assessment, it really varies to state. So it's really important that you contact your district office, and you can contact the state office. Where we are at, it is not a requirement, but it is allowed. The one thing I would say about state testing for the younger students, one of the requirements might be that you fill out a letter or a form at the homeschool office in the district. And then if the student takes the standardized test, they are now in the system with whatever score they got for that state test. And so it's something to think about, that if you don't want your child being tracked or labeled at a really young age, or decide to go back into a public school or take a class at a public school, that will follow them. Something that could happen in 3rd grade, well, that test score might show up in 10th grade for that student. So it's something to think about. For assessment, there are online assessments that you can do at your house that you can give your student. I've had some friends give the Iowa and the Stanford, the SAT-10, it's called. And so those are some, if you need to submit paperwork for testing and assessment, don't think in all states you have to take the state test. That isn't necessarily the case. And when it says nationally normed standardized assessment, some examples are the Iowa test or the SAT-10, similar to what we took maybe when we were in school. But just understand, if you submit that, it will go in a child's folder. So if you have an option for a portfolio for homeschooling, that is something that I would definitely recommend. Some homeschool students are allowed to take the ACT or SAT at the public school. They can sign up on a Saturday and take it in that setting. They may be able to participate in AP testing at their public school, and that would be your home zone school. And it would be important that somebody in your co-op contact the district office, who should be a liaison for homeschool, and find out what is available. And then as a co-op, you can go through and make that available to your parents and really have a conversation. Is this the way to go for us? But
Yes.
that is definitely something, for testing. I just want to say, if you have a portfolio option and all of your state just needs to see growth, that would be my recommendation.
Right. And you can also do that where you submit the portfolio to the state, and that's what the state receives. But you could independently, as yourself or with your co-op, decide that you want to participate in testing, that independent testing that Leah mentioned, and not not submit that to the state. So that it is a good way just to benchmark your child against other children nationally. I know when I was growing up, my parents, when we were in kind of our home base was Louisiana. And so when we were in home base, we were a part of a co-op, although as we traveled out, we were not. And this was back before everyone had access to the internet. So there wasn't a good way to keep in touch and do that. But when we were at home base in Louisiana with our co-op, the co-op did offer every year the opportunity for children to participate in the Iowa achievement test. And we always did that. And we just kept those results ourselves. Those never got submitted to the state or public school. Both Leah and I have worked in testing and accountability at school districts. So yes, this is really, it is important to know the state is meticulous about keeping records of students for this data that you're sharing. So if it gets submitted to them, that will become a record that that the state and educators and everyone else in there who has access to it will keep for years and years. All right, so for this one, tackling challenges, if you are looking for resources for co-op formation, so let's say this is something that you've decided that you want to do and you're excited about it and you want to get going and you're not sure where to begin, the state's Home Education Association might be a good place to start because they might be able to give you some of that state-specific guidelines. There are also homeschool consultants, one of the services that our company does because we're well-versed in these legal requirements, as well as the instructional piece. You can reach out and partner with a consultant who could help you with getting that co-op formed and kind of think through some of these processes. So those are good options. And then
Heather,
I'm sorry.
Excuse me for interrupting. I apologize, but I did want to let everyone know that for some reason my chat is not working. Folks have sent me messages. I'm not able to respond, but that's okay. I just wanted to let you know I'm not ignoring you. I'm just not able to respond for some reason. So I hope your chat is working. So, otherwise, if you have questions, you'll have an opportunity to unmute your video so we'll know you want to speak when the time comes afterwards. So again, pardon the interruption. Please keep going, Heather. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. And I know now we really are getting your time, so we will we'll pick up the pace a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Leah,
Let's maybe try to keep it to another 5-10 minutes max. If you can do that, that would be great.
we can do that. We'll do
Okay,
that.
thank you.
All right. Leah, you're about to take over and I'll just keep time for you.
I am. So another thing is, really if you're starting this, figuring out who you want to teach and finding like-minded parents or finding a retired teacher, a community member who are knowledgeable, public or private school teachers. All of these are different things that we had mentioned that maybe could be a possibility to help you with your co-op in the aspect of teaching, especially in upper level courses or something unique like Spanish or Portuguese. Those are French if you want to learn different languages.
Okay. All right. Let me go on. Okay. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about informal co-ops. And this will go a lot faster because there are actually a lot fewer things to think through if you're just doing an informal co-op.
So this is something that we started at my home because we had left school, like I said, and my children really didn't know, what to do next, socialization. And I know our state had looser rules than others. This was after the first time where the kids left school. So it was like the summer of 2020, and a group of friends, we started this informal co-op because I was like, number one, I started noticing that my children needed some soft skills that they didn't learn at school, and they needed some real life skills that they didn't learn at school. And I thought, no time like the present, we're at home, let's do it. And so I found other families in our church, but there can be different places that you can find them, Facebook parenting groups, support groups. But on our group, we were all friends. And so we had common goals, behavior expectations. There really isn't a commitment. If you're on vacation, it's okay. But some norms and thresholds, like with music and TV and books. And so what we did, if you want to go to the next slide, Heather, is I started with a group of friends, and we meet on Fridays during the summer. And once a month during the school year, I take a day off, or if it's during Thanksgiving or Christmas, we'll have parties. We currently have 10 members, and I have gifted students, and I have students with borderline intellectual disability, and the youngest is 9 and the oldest is 15. And we really focus on soft skills and life skills and socialization. And in that picture, that was us setting off Mentos and Coke, which is something fun that we did to talk about science. You want to go to the next slide?
Okay. Can you see it? The hand on the side.
So one thing, yeah. Okay, so the first I used to be a science teacher, and I realized my kids at school had never really done labs. And some co-op parents are the rest of our friends who were friends of ours. They might not have the lab skills, so they'll read the textbook, but they won't necessarily do labs. So we don't follow a set curriculum, but it gives kids practice to doing labs and reading direction and learning from labs. And it exposes them really to this lab environment that they're going to be expected to do when they get. And I select labs that work for all of the students. Some of them are harder, like building the toothpicks bridge was a little bit harder for my younger ones. And we used to incorporate the notebooks, but it became very consuming of our time, and I'm on a limited time scale with them on Fridays. And so we ended up just talking through, or we might watch a video at the beginning or end of it to help with the content. And then one of the other things, go to the next slide. One of the other things we do is I realized my kids weren't able to cook, and it really helps with fractions. And really none of the kids who could come over could measure very well at the beginning or knew how to cut anything very well. And so I really want my kids to be able to be independent and move into an age where they're not necessarily me, and give them independence. And it really is a good incorporation of fractions for measuring and following directions and reading directions, and what's the difference between salt and sugar, and just these life skills that I had growing up that it really became obvious during the pandemic that somehow you get busy, and they had never really learned this, and they were at an age where they're moving into middle school, and it was something they needed to know how to do. And so as a group, everybody brings the food and we all cook it together. So next slide. And something else that we do is we do drama and skits to help them focus and reading with expression and smoothly, a little bit of memorization, but really it builds confidence. They need to get used to talking to people and talking with the expression. And it's something that, like a speech class, but speech sounded kind of scary. So instead we do dramas and skits.
Can you see
then
this?
Some of our other co-op activities are boys to learn how to shake a hand well. So my husband came in that day and taught him all how to shake hands and look at people in the eye. We play outdoors. We've gone on field trips together. Sometimes we'll watch Pete's together or Snoopy together, especially during the holidays when they have the specials. So that's something that we do. We have, if you want to go day, I think the next slide is field day.
Yep.
We have field day every year, and that really kicks off our summer program, where they're able to experience something that publics experience. And we'll have every month, we'll have a Valentine's party, we'll have a Christmas party, we'll have a Thanksgiving party. We celebrate St. Patrick's Day and Easter, and then field days at the end of May, and then we kick off our summer program. And so some of the soft skills that we have on our agenda, pretty much we do the same thing, and we celebrate birthdays together this month. I have 3 of the kids in our co-op's birthday, and we celebrate them and take pictures with them and say happy birthday. And it's just been a really great thing for my kids to get a little bit more socialization. They school, and it's more cool, and need those skills that they're going to need to be successful. And that is our information. Heather, if you want to take over.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I think we ran a little over time. I'm so sorry, but yes, we're so happy to get a chance to talk to you all. Here's our contact info.
Fantastic. Bravo. That was just great. Thank you both so much. So when you have a chance, feel free to go ahead and end screen share. Great slides. I had a couple questions that occurred to me as you were going along and getting started, but you answered them. So I was going to ask, how do you handle challenges? But anyway, I'll save all of that until question and answer. Thank you very much. Great job. So this is the point in time where we would have Colleen Prayne do her presentation, and unfortunately she wasn't able to join us, but hopefully next time. But she's awesome. My husband and I helped homeschool the last 2 years, and we aligned with her umbrella school. Well, I'll just say a few words, and she provided a statement to share with you today, because I thought, you might be looking forward to what she was going to present. But she's the founder of my homeschool hub and Stratheros Academy out of Colorado Springs. And so she was going to talk about the benefits of aligning with an umbrella school and what forms to sign when removing your child from government school. But this is her statement to share with you today. I would just remind people that NOI, Notice of Intent forms created by school districts are not technically legal. The law specifically states that parents are to write a letter and submit it to any school district in the state. These forms erode our rights. No one should ever sign one of these forms. And umbrella schools like Stratheros Academy remove and replace filing the NOI, and everything is kept totally private. There's an explanation of the differences and pros and cons to using an umbrella school as versus NOI, with questions parents should ask before deciding on the Colorado tab of her website, and that'll be included in the show notes below. And she invites you to ask her any questions. She includes her email address. So she says, thank you for helping spread the word about these illegal NOI forms. So with that, since Colleen is Colorado, and I did have a gentleman join us from Utah, he was wondering if this is primarily Colorado. And just so you know that it is not, I'm based in Colorado, and I'm active in a homeschooling Facebook group where I met Marsha Brower, for example, and it might be a little heavy on Colorado, but that's not the intention. We want to open this up for even international attendees and parents to jump in and share with all of our kindred spirits here. So we're going to be starting a directory for those who are comfortable sharing your name and location, a little bit about how you come into this topic and how you might want to interact. We want to encourage networking so you can find other tribe members in your area to get things going, maybe to try setting up a co-op. That would be great. So now we are coming to our next presenter, who is Marsha Brower. So Marsha, when you're ready to unmute your video and mic, I know you're ready to do a little screen share. I'd like to share a little introduction to you. Now, Marsha Brower, she's of Colorado Homeschool Music. She'll speak today about extracurricular options for homeschoolers and the study of music's influence on academics, brain growth, and sports. So this should be very interesting, I'm sure. So Marsha, welcome. Thank you so much. And again, I want to let you know that my chat is still not working. It's frozen, but hopefully yours is still working, but I won't be able to see it. So if you have any questions, we'll just be doing question and answer after the presentation, and you can let us know you're wanting to speak by just turning off your video when we get to that portion. So Marsha, are you ready to go now?
I am ready. I'm not going to screen share until the second half.
All right, absolutely. Up to you. We're right at the hour of 11 here, our time. So feel free. You've got about a half hour, a little over if you'd like. And this is going to be a little bit longer meeting, but hopefully there's going to be tons of content that we'll all be sharing together. So thank you very much. I'll step out of the picture now.
All righty. Well, hello, everybody. I am Marsha Brower, and I am with Colorado Homeschool Music. I will tell you a little bit more about that when we get to the music part, but I just want to encourage homeschoolers that I've had people say, well, if we homeschool, then we won't have a team, and they won't get to have the opportunity to go to state, or what about drama productions, things like that. But there are so many things already out there, especially now, not like it was when I started homeschooling almost 27 years ago. And well, my oldest is 30. I always think homeschooling starts just about when the first one pops out. So probably 30 years ago, but there's so many things now that are available: music, sports, drama, 4-H. Those have always been available. There's a lot of scouting programs, and if you want to move away from the typical scouting programs, there's American Heritage Girls and Trail Life that have a Christian base to it. There are robotics clubs, there are dance troupes, there's so many things. And what I want to say about it is, if you can get into a group and you can stay in that group and you can grow your children with that group, then what really happens is they remain lifelong friends, especially when they get, up to the middle school and high school level. So that right there is the important thing. Not so much socialization, but lifelong friends is the important thing. We all know that talking to your children is socializing them, and them talking to the next door neighbor is socializing them, and also going to the grocery store. There's plenty of places to meet other people, but actually growing with a group and working with a group and doing teamwork, whatever you decide to do, is really, really, really important for your children, with friends and and memories. And take lots of pictures, because I am not a picture person, so I didn't. And especially when it went from 35 millimeter to digital, I was just clueless. So anyway, that is what I want to tell you. Now, where do you find these things? Social media, the good and the bad is you can find so many things all over social media. The other thing is, if you don't watch it, you can just get drained with social media. And I'm not telling anybody to go out there and start a bunch of social media pages so that you can keep your eye on everything, because I didn't do any social media. Of course, it wasn't as big as it is now, but I'm going to tell you that I think I missed out, and my children missed out on a lot of opportunities that I didn't know about, because we were a no Facebook, no way, never in our house. So use them for their good parts and get rid of them for the other parts. So the other thing is, I'm so glad that the other ladies were on telling you how to do a co-op, because if you don't have something in your area, start it. and you think, oh, I don't know anything about basketball. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can still start it because you can go find somebody who does. So if you're not the expert, you could go to a gym and say, hey, do you have anybody here who'd be willing to help me start a basketball program for some homeschool children? And I do have some friends in Castle Rock who went to their CrossFit trainer and said, hey, we've got a lot of homeschool families who want to come in and do this. Can you set up a class for us? And they did. So there's always ways to get it done, and you don't have to take and do the hard part yourself. You can just be part of it. So, but don't be an island in homeschooling. When I first started, it was taboo to do partnering up with other families. You need to do your own family because they're your children, this, that, and the other thing. That's not true. Just find the people that you'd like to work with and work with them. It's just what Leah and Heather said. All right, so that's what I have. That's what I have for that. Now, I don't think I'm going to take up 30 minutes. So if you guys think of lots of questions, that's the only way we'll probably take up 30 minutes. The rest I'm going to talk about is music and what music, especially studying an instrument, can do for your children's learning capabilities and how it integrates the brain. I'm not going to discuss it so much, but I'm gonna play this video. So I'm going to screen share this if I can figure out how to do this. Again, screen share, okay. And we're just gonna watch this video, and it has great information. It's less than 5 minutes, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And I would just say that all of this stuff that I have seen in this video, I have gone on later to read about or do more in-depth presentation. This is just very basic and wonderful. So without further ado, here it is.
Did you know that every time musicians pick up their instruments,
Marsha, you might want to make it full screen if you can.
on the outside they may look calm and focused, reading the music and making the precise and practice movements
No,
required.
that wasn't it.
But inside their
Oh,
brains,
I guess you were in full screen.
complex interplay
Yep.
that make up
Oh,
the
that's
individual
fine.
orchestra of our brain.
Thank you.
Was that it? No, okay. It must have started way back then. I thought I had rewound it. All right, here we go. Sorry about that.
Did you know that every time musicians
Okay.
pick up their
Can you hear
instruments,
me?
there are fireworks going
I'm
off
not sure
all
what's
over their
going
brain?
on. We'll see if it
On the
goes
outside, they
plays
may
full
look
this
calm and
time.
focused,
My video, it's a little low. If you're able to,
but inside their
it looks like
brains,
it's up
there's
to,
a party
oh,
going
that's
on.
better.
How
That's
do we
better.
know this?
Very good.
In the last
Good,
few
thanks.
decades, neuroscientists have made enormous breakthroughs in understanding how our brains work by monitoring them in real time with instruments like fMRI and PET scanners. When people are hooked up to these machines, tasks such as reading or doing math problems each have corresponding areas of the brain where activity can be observed. But when researchers got the participants to listen to music, they saw fireworks. Multiple areas of their brains were lighting up at once as they processed the sound, took it apart to understand elements like melody and rhythm, and then put it all back together into unified musical experience. And our brains do all this work in the split second between when we first hear the music and when our foot starts to tap along. But when scientists turned from observing the brains of music listeners to those of musicians, the little backyard fireworks became a jubilee. It turns out that while listening to music engages the brain in some pretty interesting activities, playing music is the brain's equivalent of a full body workout. The neuroscientists saw multiple areas of the brain light up, simultaneously processing different information in intricate, interrelated, and astonishingly fast sequences. But what is it about making music that sets the brain alight? The research is still fairly new, but neuroscientists have a pretty good idea. Playing a musical instrument engages practically every area of the brain at once, especially the visual, auditory, and motor cortices. And as with any other workout, disciplined, structured practice in playing music strengthens those brain functions, allowing us to apply that strength to other activities. The most obvious difference between listening to music and playing it is that the latter requires fine motor skills, which are controlled in both hemispheres of the brain. It also combines the linguistic and mathematical precision in which the left hemisphere is more involved, with the novel and creative content that the right excels in. For these reasons, playing music has been found to increase the volume and activity in the brain's corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, allowing messages to get across the brain faster and through more diverse routes. This may allow musicians to solve problems more effectively and creatively in both academic and social settings. Because making music also involves crafting and understanding its emotional content and message, musicians often have higher levels of executive function, a category of interlinked tasks that includes planning, strategizing, and attention to detail, and requires simultaneous analysis of both cognitive and emotional aspects. This ability also has an impact on how our memory systems work. And indeed, musicians exhibit enhanced memory functions, creating, storing, and retrieving memories more quickly and efficiently. Studies have found that musicians appear to use their highly connected brains to give each memory multiple tags, such as a conceptual tag, an emotional tag, an audio tag, and a contextual tag, like a good internet search engine. So how do we know that all these benefits are unique to music as opposed to, say, sports or painting? Or could it be that people who go into music were already smarter to begin with? Neuroscientists have explored these issues, but so far they have found that the artistic and aesthetic aspects of learning to play a musical instrument are different from any other activity studied, including other arts. And several randomized studies of participants who showed the same levels of cognitive function and neural processing at the start found that those who were exposed to a period of music learning showed enhancement in multiple brain areas compared to the others. This recent research about the mental benefits of playing music has advanced our understanding of mental function, revealing the inner rhythms and complex interplay that make up the amazing orchestra of our brain.
Okay. So, can everybody hear me now?
Yes, you sound great.
Uh-oh, it's going to play again? No? All right. So anyway, I give you that because it's, of course, I have a music school. Yes, everybody come and join me, even from Minnesota. No, I mean, that's not possible. But if you can get your child playing a musical instrument for 2 years and hopefully before they're 12, the effects that it will have on their brain are so tremendous that you can't go wrong doing that, even if it's like pulling teeth, to get them to practice, to get them to do whatever each time. It's very worth it for them to hold on, the dog is being weird. All right. It's very worth it to do that for at least 2 years. And some people say, well, I just don't want to do that battle, but I'm telling you, I have all 4 of my children didn't appear to have any problems at all with learning. Late, I found out it was all reading and eyeball control and things like that. Excuse me. And one of them also had auditory processing problems, but we got through all of the reading or the vision therapy, and the eyes were working well. And I said, okay, but here's this other thing. I say things, I look her straight in the face, say things, and she understands. And then she will swear that I never told her to do that. And I said, there's other things with hearing that I'm just not sure what's going on. And so I did take her to an auditory processing, she had tests and things like that, for a whole day. And we spent that whole day with the audiologist. I think that's what you call them. I'm not sure. And basically she said, yes, she's found a workaround. My children all played at least 2 instruments, and it was a very heavy, music's very heavy in the family. So the only way that I know that she had been able to do the things that the audiologist said, she does have some issues and she shouldn't have been able to do this, but she did extremely well on those parts of the test. So yeah, that is, I would just say music, instrumental music, even if, especially, okay, I have also taught many children who had learning issues, whether, well, it might have not been a learning issue in the brain, but maybe it was learning issues with just focusing on the person, which I guess is brain, and not fiddling around when you're needing to be still. And like a charm, within a couple of years, they were as high a level of focus as just their peers, and sometimes more, and definitely better skilled in their music than the other ones. So I'm just going to advocate big time for music education, instrumental music education. The singing never hurts because you have to listen, and then by listening and hearing all those different sounds, it helps a lot more in language, learning language, whether it's your own language or a foreign language. And I'm not a music ed at all. I didn't do music ed. I didn't even do music in college except for fun in the summer. And I'm a Spanish major. And when I opened my music school, it sounds funny, but when I did, I had those 2 backgrounds and I melded them together, and I really understood how that the brain and the hearing and everything else just brings a whole new, well, it's not a whole new meaning, but you hear more than you think you do. And musicians tend to hear a lot more than you would even imagine. So my children always say, I have a fairly big house. They are in bedrooms downstairs. We do not have systems from, like the air system. We don't have a vent from their room to ours because they have radiant heat and we have forced air upstairs. And they'll be talking and I'll just make a comment and I have to yell. And they're like, how did you hear that? But it's because my ears are trained. So ear training, amazing ear training, and amazing perception and cognitive ability. And I would say if you have children with any kind of learning disabilities, somehow get them in music, reading the music, understanding what they're reading, even if they're very simplistic. If you just got 2 sticks and you looked at the music and you went ta ti ti ta ta and ta ti ti ta ta while they're reading the music, that may just be something that would bump their understanding and their ability to have this whole brain working together on problems. So I think that's all I have. So not even 30 minutes. Wow, not even 20. But I'm open for questions if you guys are good with that.
That's great. And I'm going to invite everyone to jump in there. And if I could, I would like to support Marsha in, I'll turn my video on here too. And I shared this with you during an email. A few years ago, my husband and I were in a pretty bad auto accident, T-bone type thing. I came out of it with a concussion, a broken leg, and he had some broken bones. But I'm dealing with PTSD and short-term memory. And one of the counselors I went to, I told her that have played piano. I've been away from it for quite a while, and but she said if you could get down, she assigned me homework to spend time with my piano. She said there's part of learning music, as Marsha talked about, that's connected with the brain. So what will help your brain heal with your short-term memory and your PTSD? I'm have anxiety when I'm in a car or when I'm driving, but especially with the short-term memory, she said that that will help that improve. And I did that, and with our homeschooler, we included some simple piano with her, made it fun and easy. I found that if I made it a little bit too structured, she just kind of zoned out. But then she came to have the idea that she wanted to teach my husband what I taught her. And I thought, wow, that worked pretty well. So that's interesting. And I think something that might be kind of aligned with this, Marsha, correct me if I'm wrong, but we got a set of 5 leather juggling ball things, and we worked on that with the homeschooler. We started with the 2 balls, and then we got that down and added a third, and then we watched some videos where they were teaching us how to do that. And would that be kind of tied in with music? And my last one comment I wanted to ask you, is it true that there's a connection between music and math? So I'm done, and I want everybody else to ask questions too, but if you want to play around with what I threw at you, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so music and math, like cooking and fractions, yes, very much the same. Usually, when you have your regular common time, which is 4 counts and a measure, and a quarter note gets a count. Usually, you have 4 quarter notes, ta 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 ta. You break these down into half of a quarter note. So a half of 1/4 is an eighth. So these are eighth notes. T T T T T T T T. They still fill up the same amount of space. And then yes, music breaks down like math all over the time, all over the place. And I do have students who say, "Oh, I just hate math," and I said, "Oh, well, you need to stop right now, because all that stuff in front of you is math." And they're like, "No, nothing to stop." So there's that. And then you were saying about juggling. If you juggle like this and you do this, this is, so you're doing a round circle with all the balls. I think that is more for coordination. But once you start juggling and having the balls go across this way, that is your cross brain connection, which helps. Yeah, it helps immensely with just, well, I'm trying to think, what did we do? Well, it's to help both sides of the brains talk to each other. And so a lot of therapists will, you know, prescribe you do this exercise where you have, if this is my knee, right? So you touch your knee and then you do it again on each side. So you're going across the midline, Barry. That's what it is. You're going across the midline, which helps pull these 2 together so that you make a better.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I want to welcome everyone else who's in the meeting today. You don't have to, but we encourage you to turn off your video and turn off your video, and if you'd like to jump in and ask a question, we'll be kind of focusing on Marsha's presentation, and then we'll move to Leah and Heather's presentation for questions. And I have a couple of statements, one from Alex Newman and another one from Stacy Adams, who is she's the other, she had to leave, but she's talking about her. Anyway, she's got a great statement here. I'll finish with that, but I want to focus on our presenters while they're still here. But anybody else want to turn off your video and we can see your face? And Virginia, welcome. I know you don't have your camera going yet, but we're so happy to have your energy with us. She's just such a powerhouse of an advocate and a dear friend. So Heather and Leah, I guess you're probably still trying to preserve your bandwidth, but so we understand, and if you'd rather stay in lurker mode, that's cool too. So Val, good to meet you. We just kind of met recently, so wonderful. Thank you so much. Have you had a good time so far? Yeah. Lots of good information. Any other questions for Marsha today with her great presentation on music and all of that?
I can tell you that that short-term memory thing, as I am approaching the big 6-0, is that you know, when you forget words, it's really frustrating. I have no reason why I should forget all these words. Maybe I have too many to remember. I don't know.
That
But I have noticed, I told myself, this is crazy. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so when I am trying to search for a word, or why did I come into this room, or whatever that, something like that, I have started just humming or singing a tune, and bam, just like that, the word or the reason I'm in the room comes to me. Music is amazing. I know the Lord made it for healing and all sorts of things. I've got friends who are doing amazing things with just frequency in music and healing in music, and all these things that I don't know.
right.
The more I learn about music, the more I'm just
Like sound therapy and tuning forks and all of
right.
that I've heard too. And there's got to be a reason brain surgeons turn on the hard rock while they're operating, you know,
Wow.
they, whatever they like, you know, to keep, you know, there's got to be a good reason for that. So that's interesting. Anybody else with questions for Marsha today? All right, shall we switch over and put Heather and Leah on the spot? Any questions for you guys? We're talking about setting up a co-op. Again, I'm glad you addressed challenges. A good friend of mine who homeschools, she tried getting together a bit of a co-op, and she got really frustrated when she ran against challenges, when other members, difference of opinion on things usually surrounding the pandemic type stuff, and some would absolutely have to wear a mask and insist on it, and the others, and they didn't want to interact with kids who did. So it could be that, or it could be anything else. I'm so glad you talked about how to address that, because that seems like that could be a pretty big deal. And you know, I've talked with people about interested in starting an intentional community. You may be familiar with that. And to me, with a co-op with homeschool, it's an intentional community, right? You're bringing these people in here, and you know, not everybody's going to get along all the time, not even in our families, or maybe especially in our families. But I'm glad you talked about that. So anybody have any questions for them with talking about setting up a co-op? Are you thinking about doing it yourself? How to get going? So, no, you
I
covered.
can
You
I was just going to say real quick, I can tell you, so I didn't set up a co-op, I set up a music school. And I have the same things that some parents want this and other parents want that. And I know what I want, and I know why I set it up. So when you started talking, I said that, you know, what's our why? That's exactly it. You have to know what the why is. And one other thing I'll have to tell you is, you make sure that your board members line up with your why. Because I had a friend who had a beautiful sports program for homeschoolers, and she said finally, you know, she built it nice and big, and then she said she stepped down in right after 2019, right into 2020, and she said they they just decided to disband it because COVID was here. That fast, all that hard work, all the money, all the time thrown into it. And some of the people on her board were not, um, they were not homeschoolers. They were educators. I don't know about business people either, but it just went away. Not even, let's just put it on hold. I don't know why the whole thing had to be disbanded. I'm just thinking, why didn't you just say, well, we're just gonna take the summer off and we'll pick back up in you know, in the fall. So really, 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 and you're writing all these rules, make sure that the people that you get on board are 100% lockstep with you. I mean, yes, we all bring in a little extra things, but the core, you all have to be focused And I mean, if there's that one squeaky wheel, make sure that one squeaky wheel isn't going to turn into the big squeaky wheel and mess everything up.
Well, and I think you're exactly right though. Like that focus on the why is so crucial, whether it's, you know, a sports group or, you know, beginning a music program, whether it's a home, you know, co-op, or even just homeschooling. You know, having a really solid why, like, why am I doing this? What's my purpose? Will really help you get past some of those more challenging times, because you keep your focus on where you really want to go and what matters to you.
Right.
Such a great point, and I'm sure when you're getting all this together, you've got a mission statement going in, and that where you have the core ideas, like no matter what, we all must agree on these principles, you know, and anybody who can't get on board, then we're going to need to find a workaround, right? So good point. Val, did you want to speak up? I saw you.
I did raise my hand. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for inviting me, Christine, to this.
My pleasure.
I was a teacher for 26 years, and 21 were special ed, and the past 5 second grade. I have seen everything, and it's been really overwhelming. I actually quit my job in June. It just, the last 2 years were really chaotic. And as a teacher for myself, I'm an empath. So I'm very sensitive. I've seen a lot of kids come in as sensitives. I've seen them come in as empaths. And I just felt that being in a government school was not for me anymore. And the private schools, it's interesting because I put an ad on Facebook to my Facebook friends saying I'm ready for a new opportunity, but people keep sending me teaching jobs. And I'm kind of in a transition space right now. I'm currently living in Hawaii, but I haven't been there for the past 2 months, just visiting family and places that, you know, I felt or was hoping that I would connect with, but I haven't. I'm currently in San Diego with my sister and brother, which has been really nice. And it's just great to hear, because I also have a sister-in-law on Kauai, and her daughter's going to be in 1st grade, and she does not want to send her to the public school with all the mandates and the mask wearing. And it was very difficult for me. We were full-time in school. We had the lockdown, but because I was a private school, Catholic school, we went right back to school. And, you know, the mask mandates, I had so many parents pull their kids out. I didn't really enforce it as much as most teachers did, because how do you teach phonics to a child when you're wearing a mask? You cannot. It's impossible. But anyways, my sister-in-law, her daughter is going to be in 1st grade. And, you know, we had talked about bringing something up, but, and that's why it was interesting. I was just wondering, you know, about like the pay. There was a homeschool that interviewed me, and the parents were very rich, and they wanted to, it was the director who invited me to come in, and I would be teaching a group of 3rd graders. And then the parents decided that they wanted this one teacher. And so my sister-in-law said, why don't we just create a homeschool? I don't have a place. I live with roommates, so I can't do it at my house. And my pay was so low that I couldn't have my own place to live. So we talked about creating something, just a group of kids for 1st grade. And these are some of the things my sister-in-law came up with, some of the things that you mentioned with interviewing the parents. They have to be like-minded. They have to be, you know, we can't have any resistance for the different things that, you know, you want to teach. So we have been bouncing it around. Her daughter even said, oh, I want Aunt Val to be my teacher, Mom, and you can be the principal. So I didn't realize that you had to have a board of directors. I didn't know any of this information because this is all new to me. I have had one college friend who homeschooled all her 5 children. And now she's back into the classroom, but I don't see myself back into a classroom unless it was very special. And plus, I need a smaller group of children to work with as opposed to 20. I interviewed in Utah at Park City. It sounded like a really great charter school. And when I asked how many students would be there, in the second grade, they had 3 pods of second grade. They said, 24 to 26. And I just flat right out said, that's really way too much for me. I'm used to 8. My first year at the Catholic school was 8 kids, the first 2 years, then 14, then 18. Even 18 was a lot. How do you, address individual needs with a group higher than really 14? So I'm kind of in transition. So this is all good. All the information that you're sharing, and Marsha, even about the disabilities, since I've worked with so many kids with disabilities, how important music is. I have 2 musicians in my family. My one brother, he does kirtan, and he always says singing is so important. My other brother is a pianist. We always had music growing up in the background, mostly classical. We did have the hard rock or the rock and roll. But all these things are just so really beautiful for me to hear. And it's just a matter of me figuring out, do I take a year off and try to establish something, or do I jump right in? I guess, of course, I need to have that sustainability to be able to live as a teacher, if I was the teacher of a pod or a co-op of a small group of first graders, which I would really love to do. So thank you so much for all the information that you have shared. And it's really a wealth of knowledge for me because, like I said, it's so new being in private sector, public education. And I guess there are some politics involved in the homeschooling with the board of directors and bringing those in, but hopefully they would be a good mesh and for the, for what you're looking for in whichever homeschool that you decide to do, because I could see Leah had several different children at different ages. And like my sister-in-law was thinking about just first grade pod, which I feel that would be a better, for me. I had a school here in California that invited me. They're like, we have no positions available, but next year we would like to invite you to be you'd be a wonderful teacher at our school, first and second grade. I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do the blended. I'm just so used to, because even second grade, you have so many differences and there's so many different ranges. And so it's all new for me. I'm just learning. I'm just trying to figure out, where my next path is. So thank you for everything that you've shared. And it is a wealth of information.
Val, thank you so much for sharing that. I love your story, and we have something in common with empath. You might be familiar with highly sensitive person,
Yes.
HSP. I hit all the boxes of the symptoms, and definitely, and even into an animal empath. But
Yeah.
that is really interesting, and I like to think that should serve us well with going forward with that. And with your situation, I was just wondering if it might work for you to offer your services out there, maybe initially as a consultant, maybe an advisor, and maybe you're not in a position to do that. But like Heather and Leah suggested, a place where you might establish a location might be a local library where you have a room there. Shouldn't be any cost in that, but if you need to have your own foundation before you can branch out, but maybe you could put yourself out there in that way. That would be kind of cool. But and I hope you'll join our directory where you might mention how to contact you, that others who are trying to network and get things going, we can all that's what this is all about. Together we're better, and we can all share what we're good at. Like my husband and I did homeschooling for a friend. We're not going to be able to continue that but it was a great experience, and we didn't know what we were doing to start with. But like you talk about with the grades, as I understand in homeschool, since we're not looking to duplicate the government school model, that grades aren't such a big deal because children learn at their own pace. And they might be really good in math, but they might not be a good reader, for example. And I think it'd be good to get out from under the stigma of grades. But I know you have to measure somehow, but I don't think the emphasis should be so heavy as it is in government schools.
Mhm.
'Cause kids want to learn. They're gonna learn. That I always told our homeschooler when we started out, I said, "Well, Savannah, what do you want to hear? What do you want to learn today? Let's come up with as many questions as you can think of in 5 minutes. And let's explore the answers together." So stuff like that. And she would say, "I don't know." But we started with what we called banana blast, a critical thinking, where I said, "What's been happening in your world? How much time do you need?" About 15 minutes. She'd sit down and she'd just write out what her weekend was like, what she did, who she saw, and then when she was done, she'd stand up and read it to us. So how people are nervous about getting in front of audiences, so she kind of got over that. And some days when she'd say, nothing much is happening. And I said, "Well, that's okay." I said, "Make something up. We love a good story." So we wrote a lot of stories together. But anyway, I'm babbling, but there's just so much you can do, and you can just play with it. And, so that can be good.
Thank you so much for that encouragement. Someone did mention to me about being a consultant. I guess it's just a matter of trying to figure out how to do that. And yes, I totally understand with the aid. And that's the thing that bothered me about being in formal education, is wanting to take what a child says, "Hey, can we do this?" and expand it. That was my biggest thing that I loved to do. And I loved making pop-up books with the kids because it was their own creation. And yes, I have to get out of the rigidity of being in that environment where you had all these rules and regulations of things to follow. And being in a homeschool, you can follow what the children want. What do they want to learn? What is coming from them inside? Because that's where they're really going to catch things and grasp it. So thank you so much.
Well, and that would be challenging too, for you, I would imagine, to get out of that mindset. And, you've got muscle memory going on, right? From being a teacher and all that going on. So, I know you're going to do great. You're just going to do great.
Chris, can I ask a question?
I was just gonna call on you, Virginia. You've always.
Well, I can't do the chat. I don't know why. But anyway.
Your volume is really high. I don't know if you can turn that
Oh, okay, sure.
just a little bit.
Sure.
I'm so glad you came in. Great. Good timing.
Is that better?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Can I ask you guys, are there any organizations that are going, into local in regional places and teaching parents how to start these co-ops? And I was telling Chris, for instance, I've got two little granddaughters, and their mom and their aunt are both teachers, but I was telling Chris about 2 weeks ago, my little 6-year-old granddaughter looked at me and she says, "I want to be a boy." And I could see all this stuff coming on, but I didn't know if somebody could start like a business where you could go into, and do, like you said, the consulting and help some of these parents understand what they need to do, give them guides and that type of thing. I don't know.
That would be a good question, I think, for Leah. Are you able to kind of chime in on that? Are you still with us? I know Heather had to step away for a few minutes, but Leah, are you there? Just need to kind of unmute if you are and join in if you can. Maybe she's not able. She was having bandwidth problems, so she might not be able to hear us.
I was just going to say, if Colleen had been here, that would have been a perfect question for her, because she has mentor moms through my homeschool hub that help new homeschooling families kind of, weather the storm.
Absolutely, that's such a good point. And we did use her umbrella school, and we met with one of her mentor moms, and before we actually got going, and she was a tremendous help. And I'm a big advocate of umbrella schools, which is wouldn't you say, Marsha, that they're serve as a liaison between government school and the homeschooler? They
Yes,
kind of help cushion you from.
right.
I used to send Colleen messages and say, "Oh, am I going to get somebody knocking on my door wanting to shut down this operation?" I thought,
Right,
she made me feel more comfortable on what we could
right,
do, what we couldn't do. So,
right. HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, also has a lot of information on that. And I, I hope that you do get one of them to come and speak about what they do for the homeschooling families with their memberships, because
oh, that's a good suggestion.
yeah, write that down. Yes, because you know, I guess in the old days when there weren't so many of us, you would get knocks on the door and they would want to come in and see because they got a tip from somebody anonymously, which could be a disgruntled neighbor or family member.
Can you
And
imagine?
it was just ridiculous.
It is.
But because the toddler got out and was streaking through the front yard.
Oh,
Oh my
what
gosh,
fun!
hordes of
Sorry I
horrors.
missed that.
I know. So anyway, all that is to say, they really have most of the claims have no basis, right? And so they would tell you when you're a member, if they come to the door, you don't have to let them in. Just call us, hand the phone out the door, and we'll take care of it. And so the lawyer talks to whoever decides to come to your door and wants in. So
That's right.
that,
We don't
that's
need to let anyone in. That's true.
right. But Val, I would say to you, you could have a great consulting service online, especially for the special needs children, where like I mine weren't so deep into special needs that I could tell that they had a need, but they did have some learning challenges. I mean, there's the child who walks around and never looks at anybody in the eye and doesn't communicate, and that's an easy thing to say, oh, I need help. But mine weren't like that. Mine were outgoing, talkative, this, that, and the other thing, and I was scratching my head. Just do the next 3 questions and you can get up and be done. And those 3 questions would take hours.
Yeah.
And what I needed to know was something was wrong. And the other thing I needed to know was, were those 3 questions going to make or break that child for the rest of their life? Do I have to be the heavy-handed parent and make them get it done? There's so many better ways to deal with situations like that. Mm-hmm. And I will say I did not do well. So, but because I didn't understand what was going on with them. They couldn't tell me, Mom, the words are jumping off the page with their reading things, because they didn't know that everybody else didn't see the same thing. So
such a good point.
I think you could have a really good consulting thing right online. And if people want to come to you,
absolutely.
And if you want to look up Diane Kraft, Diane has 2 N's in her name and Kraft spelled with a C. And I think she's in her 70s, maybe getting close to 80s now. But I don't know if you've ever heard about her help. Yeah, Diane Kraft. And you might just want to call her and say, this is where I am. And I already do this and this. If you learned her system, because she has other people learning her system now, so that they can go out and keep continuing to work with these children who have just issues that they can't quite connect things. So,
does she have a consulting service?
Yes. Okay. So you can consult online or you can fly in. Thankfully, we only had to drive about 40 minutes. But yeah, she's here in Colorado.
Okay.
But, at least she did. Like I say, she's getting older, but she still talks at the homeschool conferences.
Oh,
and things
Oh,
like
that's
that.
fantastic.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
maybe you want to talk to her too. You put her on your list.
I do. I did add her. I did add
Okay.
her, and yeah, that sounds great. And by the way, I'm ahead of probably. I'm sure all of you. I'm going on 72, so and still going strong. So that's
Right, right.
just lots of passion. Got to keep on going. So Virginia, did that kind of give you some ideas? Kind of answer your questions a little bit there? Are we losing everybody? Virginia, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. You asked a great question. Did it kind of get satisfied with what was shared there?
Yeah, I was gonna say if that like these consulting ideas, maybe you could start like I said, connecting with some of these larger groups like US Pi, Parents Involved in Education, or like Moms Across America, and get some kind of a consulting package together and then approach them, and then they could get the message out as well too.
She's a wealth of information. Such a great ideas there. That is fantastic. And to kind of tie in, Joanna, by the way, welcome. Don't be shy. If you'd like to chime in, please just feel free to turn on your video or just pipe in if you just want to be audio. And I think there you are. But you don't have to. Just I didn't want you to feel left out in any way. So,
I just
so
wanted to chime in real quick if I could.
sure.
I really liked that idea of the consultation, because there's about 10 years ago, I was involved in something similar, but not for homeschool. It was for teaching school-aged children sign language to help with classroom management. And this lady created their whole program by herself and then started teaching other teachers how to teach the teachers inside their school. And she called it like teaching the teachers. But it was a really good concept. And I feel like something like that could work really well with the suggestions that were put out.
Wow. That's fantastic, Joanna. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is cool, and I would like to share. Maybe many of you may know Alex Newman. He's quite out there in the homeschooling. He works a lot with Dr. Duke Pesta. I had the opportunity to interview them both together recently, talking about rescuing children from schools, and lots of good information. But I did invite him to join us today, and he really wanted to come, but he's not surprisingly not able to make that. But he did give me a statement that he invited me to share with you, and it kind of ties in with the knock at the door and everything that homeschoolers are thinking. Oh my gosh! And I don't know why. I don't know why we feel guilty, like we're doing something bad, because it's very good what we're doing. And the government schools should be worried about people knocking on their door. And it used to be an open book, and parents used to be able to get in through the doors in government schools and find out what's going on in my child's school, in their class. Not so much anymore. I understand. But I asked Alex about that, and he gave this statement, quote from Alex Newman: "The totalitarians behind the government education system are plotting their war on homeschoolers and educational freedom as we speak. In other nations, homeschooling has already been banned. Everyone who values liberty and civilization must prepare to resist this assault by removing their children from public schools and getting involved in the political process." And I recently interviewed John Klyczak. He's author of School World Order. Highly recommend that book. And I'll share a link to our interview that went a little over an hour. He was going to try to join us today and say a few words, but he had said that he's a professor, an adjunct professor in Illinois. And he was saying, he said, if we had children, he said, to tell you the truth, I would not have them in government school. And he said, it sounds strange coming from a teacher to say that, but unfortunately, the way the climate is in schools today, he said, I can't get behind it. And he's, like he says, adjunct professor, and, you know, online mostly is how he works. So he has a little bit of an arm's length from his students. But he said, I really think it's important for homeschoolers to also be active in their current schools. He said, whether or not you have children in the school system, you're still paying for them with your taxes. He says, so you're totally entitled to show up at the school board meetings, at the education meetings, and state your case how you'd like to see things differently. You could even say, I'd have my children back here if you guys were doing this, this, and this, and this differently. So I thought that was interesting. But he said, because if you stop going to the meetings, that they might just fold and you won't have any say. And but I thought that was interesting. And my other statement I wanted to share, and then we'll go back to see if anybody has anything else to share, is from Stacy Adams. She was with this meeting, but she had to leave as well. But she commented, she made this comment on my video with John Klyczak I just referred to, and I asked for her permission to share. We're going to see if we can maybe collaborate, because she's done some amazing things, so we might join forces. But Stacy says, quote, my school district is a pilot program for the iPads in schools. They were one of the first in my state. The district is, and she's in Pennsylvania, by the way. The district is total UN goals. It's disturbing that parents have no clue. Also, they just brought on an esports program where children will be on iPads all day, and then they will have the ability to play on the computer after school and on the weekends for competitive gaming. Daha. They want our children to be zombies, addicted, and easily controlled. Unquote, from Stacy. I thought, interesting. Anybody have any comments about that? Like, we're going to be entering the metaverse here pretty soon. So.
Well, I know that Christine, in our school, and this is something that my sister-in-law is facing in the public school, she's like, I don't want my daughter on an iPad all day. We don't use iPads. They use iPads when they travel on the plane. That's it. That's the only time she can use an iPad. Honestly, I didn't bring iPads out this year. I usually use them for research, but they were so outdated and you couldn't get much information. I was supposed to do testing on them, and I didn't even bother bringing them out, and I had to get one set of testing done, and I had to borrow all these iPads from different classes. But I find that totally insulting as a teacher. I mean, I think that an iPad and the internet is good for research, but what I've noticed in the past 26 years, there's no imagination whatsoever in our children, and that is really sad.
Exactly. And
even
it's like our children are allowed to get bored.
Yeah.
They got to fill every single second with an activity. Like, here's a phone, entertain yourself. It's not a toy. And another thing that I really specialize, that I bring out, so many people don't seem to understand or even know about, is the electromagnetic radiation that emits from these devices. And children, I mean, the Wi-Fi routers are usually mounted in the ceilings above their heads, and a lot of times they donate free Chromebooks, and the kids, if they put them on their lap, their reproductive organs are there, and we girls are born with all the eggs we'll ever have, and more sterility is coming to be an issue. Sperm count is down, as you may have heard. So that's definitely an issue, and they're even looking to put Wi-Fi in school buses, for the children who live in the country. Gives them an opportunity to get their homework done on the bus. That's a metal box that those signals go in search for the cell towers, and that just zaps them all the more. And children are more vulnerable because of their blood-brain barrier still forming, and they have more water in their system, and that conducts the frequencies even more. It's all cumulative. So that's a big thing about that. A lot of people don't really realize, and they get the wearables, and all of that is getting into your system when you've got that going on.
I totally know about that. Thank you for bringing that up, Christine. It's so important. And in my classrooms, I would never allow the kids. You cannot put, and I would tell them. And if they wanted to share that with their parent, that's fine. Come and talk to me. I'll give you all the information you need to know about about radiation.
Yes. How about the
And
cell phones? Did you allow cell phones in your classroom?
no, I had a parent this year that wanted to bring she wanted her son to have one because the parents weren't allowed to walk their kids to the classroom. And I said, absolutely not. There's no need for it. Your son can walk his brother to kindergarten. He can see from our classroom and walk right back. There's no need for a cell phone for a second grader.
Well, I'm curious, did they give a reason why parents aren't allowed to walk their children to their classroom?
Oh, pandemic.
What's that?
It was because of the pandemic.
Of course. Okay. Okay.
So, a lot of our parents, parents weren't allowed on campus for 2.5 years. And that was very stressful because I used to do a lot of activities with parents.
Mm-hmm.
I invited parents in all the time and we weren't allowed. And that was very frustrating for me as a teacher.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It does a lot of psychological damage too. I'm concerned about that. I know Virginia is a big advocate on this topic. Would you like to share a few words on that, Virginia?
Well, yeah, well, I lost a son from all this stuff. So I actually won a lawsuit against the FCC last year over health effects of wireless radiation. But what I wanted to tell you guys is Barry Trower out of the UK actually told me one time, he said when these kids get on these devices, he says it's the same chemical reaction in the brain as if they were on heroin or morphine. So, this is how addictive all of this wireless stuff can be. And now we have 5G, which is very, very detrimental to their health.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Virginia was she was featured in the award-winning film Take Back Your Power by Josh Del Sol. You might be familiar with that. And thank you for mentioning that. And Barry Trower is an excellent resource. But and 5G, I have a documentary in process on 5G. It's coming along a little slowly, but I'm looking forward to bringing that out and hoping to turn all these tidbits that we're bringing in from homeschooling and all of this movement into a bit of at least a docu-series. So we'll be pulling bits and pieces I can't wait to share with you. For example, I'm pulling actual testimony from a local school district where parents were testifying at a Board of Education meeting. They each have like 1.5 to 3 minutes at the most to state their piece, and that's very interesting. So I have my video editor pulling those B-roll snippets into a video that I'm going to be stretching into with memes and graphics and little bits from my interviews, like with Alex Newman and Dr. Pesta, that hopefully that'll turn out really well. So I've never done a documentary before, but hey, why not? So I think Heather wrote a note that she had to pull away. Her son was kind of needing her. And Leah, if you're still hearing us, you might be able to hear us, but maybe not able to speak. But thank you both so much for joining us. And anyone have any final words before we wrap up? And there we are, Leah. Hello.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. I just have, it keeps coming up with my bandwidth is unstable.
Right.
So I just turned off my video and everything. So,
Sure.
But thank you so much for having us. It's been a great discussion. And
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And Marsha, your presentation was great. And, Joanna, thank you for chiming in, and Virginia, fabulous content. And Val, you're going to do great. You have everything it takes. So feel free to reach out anytime, email, whatever. We're going to be getting our directory together. I'm going to be making notes. So I'm going to stop our recording right now. Don't go away, but we'll just turn this off for now.